This is going to be the most important offseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs in decades. Once again, they are disappointingly eliminated from the playoffs, and now massive decisions need to be made, and nothing should be off the table. There is no Mickey Mouse solution to their problems. Their coach is set, as well as their goaltending. The real discussion is, should they break up the core four? And no matter what they decide to do, this will reshape the Leafs for years to come. This is our outlook on the Toronto Maple Leafs offseason. We are taking over the Leafs, and we're going to answer some serious questions that they need to figure out, such as whether they should re-sign Mitch, Marner and John Tavares. But however, I want to start off with the root cause of all the issues, which is Brandon Shanahan, who is the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs and is on an expiring deal. And I want to start off with an easy question. Should they bring Brandon Shanahan back?
I say no.
It's a no. It's a no.
11 years. You're now on your third head coach. You went from Mike Babcock to Sheldon Keefe to now Craig Berube. You also are on your third general manager, I believe, as well. You got rid of Kyle Dubas because, based on reports, Kyle Dubas wanted to break up this core four. In my opinion, core five. I'm going to put in Morgan Riley in there as well. That's just my opinion. He wanted to break it up. You wanted to run it back. To play a little bit of devil's advocate to start, though, before I completely agree they need to make changes, but to play a little bit of devil's advocate, this is the first year the Leafs, this is the furthest the Leafs have went in their last 9 years since Matthews came into the league, right? Anthony Stolarz got hurt in game one.
Yes.
Game one, right?
Game one.
So there's some cause to say, hey, they could run it back and maybe next year will be different. Okay, now back to reality for me. 11 years for Shanahan. 9 years for this core, essentially. First year, fine. Second year, fine. You're getting your feet wet. You're a young team. You're getting up there. The problem here is this. You could blame Shanahan, but you also have to blame the players.
Oh yeah, the players are not getting away with it.
Yeah, they're not getting away with it.
Definitely not getting away
But here's the thing where Shanahan gets the blame. You got rid of Kyle Dubas, for example. Kyle Dubas, whatever he's doing at Pittsburgh is a different story. But Kyle Dubas gave some thought of like, hey, we need to change things up. Your players cannot play under pressure. Okay? That's on the players as well. Don't get me wrong. Matthews, injury aside, not the greatest performer in game 5 to 7. Same thing with Marner. Same thing with whatever, right? But you're the guy in charge. You're the guy that needs to make those tough decisions to break certain things up, right? And I'm going to give you some examples. Number one, I'm going to bring basketball into this conversation. Your favorite team, the Toronto Raptors. What did they do when LeBron left the East to go to the Lakers?
They wanted to confirm it. They got rid of DeRozan because he wasn't performing in the playoffs, and they brought in Kawhi Leonard, obviously, in that big trade.
Yeah, like they could have easily been like, oh, LeBron's gone. We should be able to win the championship now, which many people have thoughts of. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to bring another example here. The Florida Panthers.
The Florida Panthers just keep adding, bro.
No, but here's my point. Though.
They just keep
Their
adding.
core before they got Kachuk was Jonathan Huberdeau, Alexander Barkov, Ekblad, Bobrovsky. You could even throw, and then certain solid pieces, right? They got, was it first rounded or second rounded when they won the President's Cup?
They got swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning in the second round.
So what did they do? They didn't say, oh, whatever. Jonathan Huberdeau had a great year. We'll come back next year and we'll be fine, right? No, they went out and made the tough decision to trade Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar, who's a solid defenseman for them, to bring in a guy like Matthew Tkachuk. In their first year, the regular season was meh, right? They finished like 8th, or they barely squeaked into the playoffs, right? But they got to the Cup final. What happened the year later? They won the damn Stanley Cup. What's happening this year? They eliminated the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games and are now in the conference finals as we speak.
They're always look to add. They added Marchand at the deadline as well, which is also a big add, and he made a big difference in the series as well. Yeah. So like teams like that are always looking to change things up and get better. That's why they're so good, right? Tampa Bay Lightning, for example, the reason why they made the finals 3 years in a row is because they kept on adding and getting better each and every year. Obviously, LTIR helped a lot with that as well. But consensus answer for us, Brandon Shanahan should not be back. I was going to say Kyle Shanahan. And all that is obvious because at the end of the day, 11 years, there was still zero success for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But let's get into some bigger decisions that we have to make.
One thing I do want to say very quickly, though, as of this recording, Brandon Shanahan is getting an interview with the New York Islanders as well. So by the time this comes out, who knows what the news is.
Here's the thing.
Like
here's the thing with this connection here. Lou Morello was in Toronto.
Yeah.
I went to New York Islanders, and now
did all right for a little bit.
And then now they're going after Brandon Shanahan. So at the end of the day, the Islanders are writing their own death wish right here, essentially, in my opinion, but because they need to go in a different direction. But when I'm looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, obviously you're going to think about their major free agents. And we're going to start off with one big one they signed, obviously, years ago, who was making $10 million this year, which is John Tavares. And the question is simple. Should they bring John Tavares back? And me personally, I'm going to say no.
I agree with you. I'm gonna say no. Obviously, we're gonna. I'm gonna fast track this a little bit. John Tavares, his age, his number right now, great. He might come back for $5 million. I still think that's too much for him. He had a fine regular season, but you need to move on. That's the whole point of us saying Brandon Shanahan needs to go. Even if Brandon Shanahan stays, he needs to move on from some of these guys and make tough decisions, right? You need to move on. Simple as that. There's only a couple players in my mind, and we'll get to them, that they should probably keep and then try to figure out what they could do without him. That's $10 million. That's going to be 11 million off the books right there.
That's like, 11 million right there for an aging, at the end of the day, at once was a superstar, but not anymore. John Tavares was a great player. It was a great signing when they initially got him, just because obviously he was, the best player on the New York Islanders, and he did help this Toronto Maple Leafs team take another level.
Yeah.
We're not denying that. John Tavares was a great Maple Leafs player, but at the end of the day, his time is up. He is slowing down and regressing, and he hasn't been a playoff performer, unfortunately, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But again, another same answer. But let's go to the big one here. This is the biggest topic. This is the biggest topic because Mitch Marner, him being gone will make a big difference. And obviously, when you're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs and Mitch Marner, what he has done each and every year, he has made a big difference in the regular season for these guys. He has helped this team. Obviously, he is one of the biggest reasons why this team is a perennial, division contender, essentially. They're always so close to winning the division. Obviously, some years are second, some
This is the first year they won it.
This is the first year they won it. And Mitch Marner had a great regular season.
Yeah.
But his asking price is around $14 million. And that is very tough for me to give. So I acknowledge that the Toronto Maple Leafs will be worse if they lose Mitch Marner. But I cannot give $14 million per year to a guy who is just not simply clutch. He's a great player, no questioning his ability, but his clutchness, other than Team Canada, is not there in a blue jersey for Mitch Marner. So as much as I hate to say it, I am not gonna pursue re-signing Mitch Marner.
I'm not even gonna bring the money into this conversation. He's at 10.9 right now. Let's just say 11 million right there. So between the two of them, you're clearing up 22 million right there, right? If I were to predict, I think John Tavares will be back on a certain degree, but Mitch Marner, there's two things I'm gonna look at it. First, from the Leafs side of things. Once again, what I mentioned for John Tavares, it's time to move on. You were not able to get a contract done during the whole year, during the offseason when you were able to extend him. He's a hometown guy, but clearly the fans are not a fan of him. Sometimes in the media, he rubs people the wrong way as well with certain answers that he gives, right? So why would you want, and then again, I believe it was Mike Bartner who put the stat out in general. He put two stats out. One was relating back to Brandon Shanahan, this year's trade deadline additions, Seth Jones, Brad Marchand did more than Scott Lawton, and I forget who else, Brandon Carlo, right? The other thing, it was between games 5 to 7 in their career. I think in game 7 in general, Matthews and Marner have 0 goals.
Yeah, they're not clutch.
Right.
Yeah.
So why? Listen, at the end of the day, the goal is to get success in the playoffs. Yes, the goal is to get to the playoffs first in order for that to happen. To your point, it's going to be tough to let him go. But again, it's the same old story, and now you have the ability to move off of someone. You have to do it.
Here's
right?
the thing.
And on the flip side, one more thing on the flip side. The fans are booing Marner. So if I'm Marner, why the hell would I want to go back to either?
That is true, obviously. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be a hometown factor, which is going to be some sort of case as well. And obviously playing there, his whole entire career is obviously going to be a big factor. But here's the thing with Marner. Like, at the end of the day, we both agree that if the Toronto Maple Leafs lose Mitch Marner, they're going to be a worse team than last year. Obviously, that's a debate. That's not a debate. I mean, there's also not a debate that wherever he goes, say it's Detroit, he could potentially help Detroit make the playoffs next year. Say it's Carolina, I don't know if he's going to help him take a step because they need like a playoff performer to help him take a step. But at the end of the day, he will still help Carolina. Imagine if he goes to Florida because they somehow do have the cap space.
Pressure's off of Toronto. Yeah. If he leaves Toronto, there's going to be
because media.
Unless he goes to like Vancouver. Yeah. There's extremely less pressure on him.
Like if whatever place he goes to, he's going to make that team better, right? Even if it is Vancouver, obviously. I don't think that's happening, but even if it is, he's going to make the team better. But the issue is, and the biggest reason why you need to move off is like you already mentioned, well, you made it a core 5. I'm just going to stick it with a core 4. I'm going to disrespect Morgan Riley, but I think that's fair. The core four makes essentially 50% of the cap. And when you brought up the points of like how Florida Panthers kept adding, how the Toronto Raptors changed it up, and obviously all these other like the Philadelphia Eagles change it up like every year, essentially. If you're looking at NFL example as well, when you're looking at this, and I'm looking at another team that doesn't change it up, right? Who kept their core for a lot of years, and that was the Washington Capitals. They kept Ovechkin, Backstrom, John Carlson, Holtby for the longest time. The issue with that and the issue with this, or that the reason why this is not similar is because their core four doesn't make 50% of the cap. So they're able to add people like TJ Oshie when they're, added in.
Okay.
They're able to add Lars Eller, and they're able to add Justin Williams, and they won a Stanley Cup, right?
Okay.
So at the end of the day, like when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, the Capitals did it when they kept their core together the whole time, right? Fair argument, but the issue is their core four didn't make up 50% of the cap, so they're able to add pieces and rely on their depth scoring, whereas you guys, you have four players. If those four players don't show up, you're going to be relying on rookies like Matty Nice coming in as a young guy and other like random depth players. Like at the end of the day, you're going to be asking Max Domi to freaking score hat tricks for you, which is not going to help.
Capitals also made changes. Mike Green was not on the cup winning team, I believe. Alexander Semin was let go early when they were failing early on, as good as a player Alexander Semin was. So they still tried to make changes, whether that worked or not.
But like they're not necessarily a core four.
Well, Semin at the time was.
Yeah,
Mike Green was considered a core guy.
Yeah, but like when you're looking at the main guys, were obviously Ovechkin and Backstrom.
Yeah.
And obviously Holtby when he came in, and then
John Carlson,
as well.
whoever you want to add.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, like I'm just thinking of their four best players and these guys' four best players. That's the difference, and that's why, in the case it worked for the Washington Capitals. This is why it's not going to work for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So like, yeah, consensus answer, which is weird to say, that you have to move on from Mitch Marner.
I don't think it's weird to say.
Well, it's not weird to say.
I don't think it's weird to say at all because there have been talks, should we trade him, should we trade him, should we trade him? Here's the thing, to your cap, again, devil's advocate a little bit here. Cap's going to go up. Okay, great.
That doesn't matter.
No, that's what I'm saying. Okay, great.
22 million?
No, great. 1 second. Let's just say you do pay Marner, whatever. You have to pay Matthew Nice. The guy was good for them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like during our preview video, I said this guy can help him, and he had for the most part, right? He might command like 5, 6, 7 million himself. He's an RFA coming in. Do you want to risk an offer sheet? They'll probably match whatever it comes down to, but do you want to risk it being in the other team's hands to pay whatever contract he's gonna get, right? So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this: they need to move on. Simple as that. Brandon Shanahan, listen. I don't blame Mitch Marner for not waiving his no move clause or whatever to get a trade done. He has every right to be that. I'm not a Leafs fan, but even if I was a Leafs fan, you can't hate on that. That's his every right.
It's his contract,
right?
Bro, yeah.
I heard that Brandon Shanahan also was a factor of not getting in Mikko Rantanen, whether that be not moving off of Matthew Nice or even Mitch Marner, if that was the case as well. If that's the case, that's
get out of here, bro.
Shanahan's got to go.
Like as a Leafs hater, I would say stay, but like I'm doing this with no bias. So yeah, in that case, you got to get out of here. So at the end of the day, we've answered the question, should the Leafs run it back? And the clear answer is an obvious no, because they have failed every single year in the postseason with this core four players. But the issue is now we're in our world, where Marner and Tavares are gone, which means the team's worse. And at the end of the day, they still have good pieces. They still have, great players. But now, at the biggest factor now is going to be, worry was never making the playoffs or worries about doing something in the playoffs. But with Marner and Tavares leaving, now there's going to be a worry.
Atlantic division.
Yeah, tough Atlantic division. The worry is going to be making the playoffs because Ottawa's on the rise. Montreal's on the rise. We think Detroit's on the rise, but they somehow don't play the first half of the season, like pop up in the second half.
There's always random.
And Buffalo's probably going to finish last place. And I don't think Boston's going to be last place again as well. So that'll be a little bit tougher. And obviously we're, Florida.
And then listen, if it comes down to wild card side, you still got the two New York, well, I would say Jersey and New York Rangers for sure. Carolina's going to be good. We don't know what Washington's going to be like next year. Pittsburgh might take a jump.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's going to be tougher. So now you got to look in this situation. Now you freed up $22 million with two players, which is literally 25% of your cap. Now you could add in like probably 3-4 players here in free agents, and obviously one of them will be Matthew Nice. But like at the end of the day, you have now some room to add in more depth, which can at the end of the day help them secure a playoff spot. And I'm gonna throw out one name there, since obviously John Tavares is gone in this world. You're gonna be looking for a second line center, and obviously I'm gonna look at the best one available, and also steal him from a potential cup winning team in the Florida Panthers. Back-to-back cup-winning team in the Florida Panthers, and I'm going with Sam Bennett because this guy has obviously the defensive game, and he's a great,
he's a playoff player.
He's a great matchup against any superstar level player you gotta defend, And also, like you said, he's a playoff player. In the Four Nations, he's also scored big goals for Team Canada. He scored big goals for the Florida Panthers, obviously. Obviously, he's going to be like getting a raise like 4 million at least, right? Because his contract's like a 5 mil, 4.5, 5 mil right now. So obviously he's going to go up to 8 million. Again, I think it'll be a little bit expensive for him, but he is a good, viable second line center for these guys. And I think they should make a push for him if they do decide to move on for Marner and Tavares and they have the room.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. Do I think he's going to leave Florida? I don't think so. I think reports are that he's more like there was a thing of who's more likely to stay, Marner or Bennett. Everybody said Bennett.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that. I thought when you said best of one available, I thought you went with Brock Nelson. I don't think he's coming to Toronto, but he's another guy that's potentially available that could help you in the second line center as well. Made Team USA. He had a good year. Obviously a bad playoffs a little bit with Colorado.
Very bad playoffs, yeah.
But that's one name. Let's talk about the wingers then. Because you're also going to be losing the two-way ability of Marner. The guy was a Selke finalist, I think, last year as well. And there's two big names that come off. Number one is Nikolai Ehlers. Speedy player, fast player. Only knock on him really is the injuries and the defensive side of things a little bit, I guess you could say. Number two player that comes to my mind, looking at this list, is Brock Besser.
Goal scorer. When he's healthy, he's a goal scorer. Yeah.
Who got in the playoffs when the 1 year with the Canucks?
Oh, last year he was great. Brock Besser was amazing in last year's playoffs. He was a Canucks' best forward.
Yeah.
In last year's playoffs, he brought the offense. He scored goals. So at the end of the day, he's also developed a defensive game playing under Rick Tocchet for the last couple of years. So he's gotten better defensively.
Yeah.
So I would say like if you get like a Sam Bennett, which is obviously probably might not be likely, but if you do, then you could get a Nikolai Ehlers to add a little bit more of the offensive game. But you could still get away with, if you get like a Brock Besser, he should be able to provide the two-way ability. Only thing Besser obviously will not going to provide is the play drive ability. You're going to have to find a partner and a proper line mate to help set up Besser's chances.
Otherwise, the one thing that Shanahan did well this year, finally he did well when he got Stolars and when he got Chris Tanev, but other things he did was buy low. He got in Max Pacioretty, who was fine for them in the playoffs. He might be retiring, he said. You brought in a guy like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who was fine for them this year as well. So I'm looking at a guy like Andrei Kuzmenko, who had a good year in LA. If I'm Kuzmenko, I'm staying in LA.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, Andrei Kuzmenko is a good shout there for a buy low cost. I'm looking at a guy, Mikhail Granlund.
Granlund is a good one.
Center, and he could play on the wing as well.
Granlund's a goal scorer, bro.
And like he was like with the hat trick with Dallas and game.
No, he's been good. Yeah, Granlund's.
So those are some. Obviously, we could go on and on. I don't want to go too much.
No, but the thing is, like, the point we're trying to make is like at the end of the day, the issue is you only could rely on 4 players, right? Essentially, and if obviously those 4 players aren't going off, you don't have much help afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like when you look at or essentially like 4 players, and you're looking at one line, right? You're still gonna have that line, right? You'll still have Matthews, Nylander, and Matthew Nyes. If they should bring him back. Obviously, that's a great first line, and in the NHL, that's a top tier first line. So if that line's gonna be your main production line, right? Which every cup contending team has. Obviously, Edmonton has it, Dallas has it, Carolina, Loki has it. If they just continue their goal scoring, obviously they're more defensive, and obviously the Florida Panthers have it. The difference between the Leafs and those 4 teams is that those 4 teams get scoring from all 4 lines. Not much so Carolina, but like the other 3, the main 3 that we think could win the cup, will get production throughout the 4 lines. The only issue is that with the Leafs, they only have 4 players and they don't have good depth players. They're all young guys or old vet minimum contracts. Like at the end of the day, Ryan Reeves wasn't going to do anything for you.
Yeah,
right.
He was just there to be an agitator type.
Exactly right. Don't get me wrong. Like you're gonna need some of that too. Their role is not to score goals as well. Like that's for the main.
But you
players.
want people that could be on the net as well. Like you need Brad Marchand for example.
He's a free agent. You need someone to step up.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, they don't have the pieces to step up because at the end of the day, like the focus is on 4 players. It is very easy to game plan for 4 players than a whole roster.
Especially if those 4 players have fear when it comes to the clutch moment.
And they don't show up, yeah.
2 things to close it out on. One, I want to touch on before we talk about the trade potential. The other way you could also get better is by developing your own players. In a certain, we're young guys. I don't know what their prospect pool is like, but the reason why I bring that up, Dallas's core was not getting it done. In terms of Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin. They developed Wyatt Johnson, Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen took a step.
Robertson.
Right? So these guys, And even then, with those guys, they were good, but guess what they did? They added Mikko Rantanen. They moved off from Lewin Stankoven and got who was nothing bad for them, but Mikko Rantanen was available. You do that trade 10 times out of 10.
You get Mikko Rantanen.
Now and then they won their game. They came back and won game 1. Right, Mikko Rantanen's a big reason why they beat the Avs in the first round. Carolina, they made that. It may have failed. They failed the Mikko Rantanen thing. Jake Gensel didn't work out. Fine, but they still made swings. But even then, they're developing. They're getting buy low guys, or they're getting they have their group like
they have their young guys they develop.
Yeah, exactly.
Sebastian Aho, Svechnikov,
Jacob Slavin,
right? Like, so is incredible.
There's a lot there as well. So that's the development thing. But the last thing is to close this video out. Before I bring this up, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. As you can tell, this is a brand new channel, Beyond the Rink. Make sure you guys like this video as well for more content like this. Would you entertain anyone being traded? And my answer to that off the bat is if you can move off of Morgan Riley, who's on a $7.5 million cap hit till 2030 and has taken a major step back this year, you have to try to do it. Even if you take a huge loss off of it, and then you could use that cap space, even if you retain some bits, Aaron Ekblad is potentially available, or whoever else, you need to move off of it. Because right now, your defense is good for the most part.
It is solid, also, yeah. But here's the thing. Here's what I'm looking at, right? This Morgan Riley deal is kind of going to be like a Darcy Kempfer for Pierre-Luc Dubois type trade, right? Where like, at the end of the day, he has to move on, right? Like, I feel like a change of scenery is needed. I think Morgan Riley is a good player. Like, I genuinely think
he took a step back.
But he did take a step back. And he's also getting up there in age. But overall, like, at the end of the day, like, if it was last year, obviously, it's kind of like, obviously 1 year too late. I would have taken that deal for like, Pierre-Luc Dubois if he was like, he took the step back the year before.
You gotta
right?
Sorry, that's the thing. You gotta take swings like how Washington did with Dubois, and that became a win-win trade for both teams somehow.
Yeah, somehow it did. But
so sometimes you gotta take a swing there.
So like, I don't think you're necessarily gonna get out of like, it's gonna be very difficult to cap dump Morgan Riley. So at the end of the day, it's gonna be like just find another player who's struggling, but like who's a good player, but just needs a change of scenery. And if you could do a swap with that I think that's the best way to get some sort of plus for Morgan Riley. And
to close it out, the two guys, Matthews and Nylander. Matthews has 3 more years remaining on his contract. That's the only question mark you have. Nylander is there for till 2032, I want to say. Let me just confirm that very quickly. Yeah, 2032.
Here's the big thing, right? At the end of the day, if you're looking at the 4 people, the one player that did show up the most is probably William Nylander throughout the years. Auston Matthews is a guy...
There was something wrong.
There was something wrong. Yeah, but here's the thing. Okay, when I'm looking at Nylander, I'm not going to actively like, oh, Nylander's up for trades. Let's go trade him. I'm not going to do that, right?
Even with Matthews.
And obviously even with Matthews. Like Matthews, I'm not even do that. Like, here's the thing. Like, I feel like some teams, like if they're desperate, might take a swing on Nylander. Yeah. I'm listening. I'll say that much.
I'm listening on both these players.
I'm definitely listening on Nylander. I'm listening on Matthews if the trade is like, say, again, very improbable situation, but like, at the end of the day, I saw Mikko Rantanen get moved, so people do get upset. If some sort of star player, though, I'm going to use the biggest one example, obviously it's not happening. Say Connor McDavid is upset with the Oilers and doesn't want to extend, right? Yeah. Then you freaking entertain a Matthews deal.
I'm not even going that extreme. Bro, like, I'm going to say if there's any solid young guys that become available.
But if that happens, you got to rebuild then. Yeah. You got to trade everything.
I know, exactly.
But I don't think, like, here's the thing. We're trying to make the least, if we're trying to make the least competitive, like, you do it for, like, say, if Draisaitl was upset and didn't do it, like, because at the end of the day, Matthews is a top 5 player in the NHL, right?
Yeah.
Matthews is.
When healthy, yes.
Yeah, when healthy, like, Matthews is a top 5 player. He's the best goal scorer in the NHL. Yeah. So you're not going to, if you're going to get rid of Matthews, it's going to have to be, like, some sort of similar caliber player. Again, Matthews for Rantanen is obviously not, I wouldn't have done it just because, obviously, Matthews is a better player than Rantanen, right? When healthy, in my opinion. So that way, the Marner and Rantanen deal made sense more for me. So if you're looking at Matthews and Rantanen deal, you're looking at guys who are like, are really up there, like the best, bona fide top 10, 7 players in the NHL. If that type of things happen, then I'm listening. Otherwise, I am gonna keep Matthews as more untouchable. So to close it out here very quickly, just a quick rundown of what we decided. Yes, they need to change it up. They should have changed it up 3 years ago, if anything. Yes. But whether Brendan Shanahan goes to the Islanders, whatever the case may be, no matter what, you need to probably most likely build around Matthews. You agree? Nylander. I would say Matthew Knies now is in the picture a little bit. And I'll throw in, obviously, Chris Tanev.
That, like those are like the main stays for me at this right now. Those are the four I would say you if you're gonna break anything up, you keep those four. Everyone else, you can move on. And yeah, you're not gonna.
I'll keep
you're
the
not.
I'll keep the goaltending duo.
Oh, obviously, yeah. I'm not gonna. Okay, goaltending duo aside.
Yeah.
Stolarz does have one more year as well. But yeah, you weren't able to trade Marner or Tavares. Whatever. Cap space is valuable in this league. You could even sign and trade them, like Pierre-Luc Dubois did when he first went to LA from Winnipeg.
Yeah.
You could do stuff like that as well, and see where that goes. But those are the four I would say. Outside of the gold, obviously not including the goalies, that you need to probably build around, especially, and move on from the other two guys. And listen, you might be slow to start. Florida knows that best when they first brought in Kachuk. It might lead to long-term success in the future.
Oh, 100%.
Simple as that.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, like, it is a tough time to do this because the free agent class is a little bit weaker. But at the end of the day, changes got to be made. And this is the best time to do it because at the end of the day, you're getting $22 million. It doesn't have to be all through free agency. If, you know, you can make a blockbuster deal, you make the blockbuster deal. But some things got to change. And this is the best way and simplest way to change right now is to let these two big contract players, big players as well, leave the organization. And that is our offseason outlook on the Toronto Maple Leafs. But if you guys want to check out our conference finals predictions and previews, that'll be popping up to my right. So we'll catch you guys over there and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.